Start?
Yes, Chair, we can start.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning, honorable members, the support staff of the committee, members of the public, members of the media. Ladies and gentlemen, you are all welcome to this meeting. Standing Committee on Appropriations. Today it's meeting with the Financial and Fiscal Commission. Dr. Mava and the commissioners and everybody from your team, you are all welcome. We are looking forward to interacting with your good selves. Perhaps let me just say before we proceed that all speakers are expected to switch on their videos. That's 1, 2. Everybody else should be muted unless we are talking, so that we don't disturb the meeting. FFC will be briefing the committee on the 2022 appropriation bill and the second adjustment appropriation bill. So we'll be interacting with them. They'll be briefing us as a committee, and as the people of South Africa who are watching on this thing, their take on these two bills. We'll give FFC maximum 45 minutes to deal with their presentations, and then after that, the members of the committee will interact with the presentation. Darren, before we proceed, can I check? Do we have any apologies?
No, Chairperson. We haven't received any apologies for this meeting.
Thank you so much. Dr. Mava and your team, please take us through your presentations, and you'll only bring the meeting back to me at about 45 minutes, after about 45 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson of the committee, and good morning to honorable members. It's a great pleasure for the FFC to be here to bring you our comments on the 2022 appropriation bill and the 2022 second special adjustment appropriation bill. Our researchers members are ready and they are prepared with the presentations. I will hand over to them. I will come towards the end with concluding remarks. But at this time, I want to give the opportunity to our researchers. Over to you, Chen.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, indeed, Honourable Chair and members of the Standing Appropriation Committee. Today, our focus is, let me move the slide, it's on the Appropriation Bill and the Adjustments Appropriation Bill of 2022. So I shall fly through the first 3 sections that you see here before you, as we've done them before, but instead talk about some of the more recent developments in the world affecting our economy and fiscal outlook. So since our last engagement, Honourable Chair members, our world economy outlook on the horizon has taken a turn for the worse. And this time, unfortunately, it is arguably man-made. The most significant of which is that the American Central Bank, the Fed, has decided to increase the interest rates and announce that it will shrink its portfolio of investments in the world as its policy stance to combat inflation, they said. Following in its footstep in the wrong direction, we believe, is the Bank of England, also increased its rates. Our research at the Commission observes that this great reversal in monetary policy with disappointment, and we think it might be, first, an error in their judgment and misapplication of financial and fiscal policies, and second, the imposition and repercussions of these policy direction or policy decision errors on emerging economies such as ourselves in South Africa. First and foremost, monetary policy is only effective against demand pull inflation. You will remember that in our last annual submission of 2022-23, we specifically made a deep dive research into the separation between the core versus non-core inflation, but also we highlighted the fact that it's very important to differentiate between what inflation we're talking about. Is it demand pull or cost push? And we argue that where our evidence of COVID lockdown recently around the world and ourselves disrupted and broken supply chains, and the evidence of the war and sanctions in the Northern Hemisphere points squarely at a supply side push inflation. Second, as our South African financial system is intricately linked to the financial markets of the world, investments, and the rate hike in arguably the most risk-free investment that is the US and the UK, these advanced economies, the South African Reserve Bank is now put in a difficult position, but to follow suit in raising the interest rates coming this Wednesday. To maintain the risk and reward differentials, to avoid a capital flight and depreciation of our South African rand to what is now a higher yielding investment in these advanced economies. Unfortunately, monetary policy is no place for the contrarians. As we so clearly learned from Turkey to reduce its interest rates, disregarding inflation, only to feel the chronic and insurmountable pain when its Turkish lira depreciated, pass-through effects kicks in through trade and excess liquidity. Today, Turkey's inflation now is rising at nearly 70% or 69.97% annual inflation rate. In some, Honorable Chair and members, there is little doubt that more pain will be felt throughout the economy globally, as well as our own, and especially that of our fiscal base, our economy, and more importantly, employment, jobs, and productivity must be bolstered. So I hope that is the context that is I have set out for you, Honorable Chair members. Now let me hand over to Sasha, who will take you through the focus point of today, which is the Appropriation Bill and the Adjustment Appropriation Bill. And following that will be Thando Ngozo, Minister, will talk about some of the SOE matters. Thank you, Sasha, if you please.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair, members of the committee and colleagues. As Chen mentioned, the next few slides will hone in on highlights from the 2022 Appropriation Bill and the Second Adjustment Appropriation Bill. So in total, members will know that the 2022 Appropriation Bill allocates just over R1 trillion across the 41 votes for the 2022-23 financial year. And compared to the revised estimate for 2021-22, this amount represents an increase of about 3%. So that's when we look back. However, when we look forward, we see that the positive growth that is being projected for 2022 will not be maintained in 2023, when departments again are set to see widespread reductions and slower growth. So definitely the revenue windfall caused by the commodities boom has allowed for some increases for 2022-23, but based on the projections for 23-24, departments are set to feel the pinch again. And as I mentioned, the next few slides will just highlight some issues that the FFC would like to bring to the committee's attention. So if we look at the money being allocated via the appropriation bill in terms of the economic classification components, we see that transfers and subsidies is the largest type of spending, and it accounts for 71% of spending. And this, of course, emphasizes the fact that in our three-sphere system, it is your subnational governments and other government agencies that are the real service delivery implementers. Thus, the flows of intergovernmental transfers to provinces, municipalities, and other government agencies accounted for under that item of transfers and subsidies. The second largest item is current payments at 259 billion. And the largest proportion of that 259 billion is used to pay COE, cost of employees. 69% of that amount, to be specific, is in respect of COE. Now, when we look at the bill by vote, members will know that the largest allocation across the national votes is in respect of the social development vote. And there are three key developments that drive the increase in the social development vote this year and over the next 3 years. The next 2 years. The first is the extension of the social relief of distress grant for another 12 months. We know this comes at a cost of 44 billion and has been enabled by the revenue windfall experienced. The second development is the adjustment to the child support grant, which will be expanded to include double orphans. And then the third development will be the linking of the social security grants to inflation. Now, the Commission supports these interventions as we believe they will bring necessary relief to poor and vulnerable households who rely on social security grants, especially given the detrimental effects of the COVID-19 pandemic that have been experienced over the past 2 years. And in terms of the timing of these developments, the SRD grant is set to stop in March 2023, and so next year, March, while the other two developments I mentioned, the linking to inflation and the extension to the child support grant, will be implemented in 2023-24. And just to mention that regarding the permanent replacement of the SRD grant, the Commission notes that there are processes underway to identify a sound alternative. And for the Commission, one of the central considerations that should be kept in mind when evaluating the viability of any replacement is the long-run effect that it will have on the sustainability of the fiscus. If you can move to the next slide, please, Jen. The other area of funding that has benefited from the revenue windfall is higher education, where an additional 32.6 billion is said to be transferred through this vote to the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS. The funding will be used to continue support to existing bursary holders and to provide funding for new entrants into the system. And here, the Commission would like to highlight the fact that the provision of bursaries to existing and new students is not a temporary or once-off type of support. What it does is it creates a future funding obligation, at the very least over the short to medium term. And thus due consideration must be given to government's ability to sustain this level of funding over the medium term, especially given the 2023-24 forecasts of reductions or slower growth. So if revenue does not recover, the implication is that, for example, this Department of Higher Education and Training budget will be under severe pressure come 2023-24. And we could jeopardize the the support that we are wanting to provide to students from low-income households. We do, however, note that according to the 2022 budget review, a new higher education funding model is set to be introduced in 2023. So the Commission will await the contents of that new funding model. Then with respect to basic education, we know it's another key vote, and there are nominal increases over the next 3 years. But of course, what is more important in that sector is what happens at the provincial education level, since that is where the delivery of basic education takes place. And to that end, the Commission welcomes additional funding aimed at assisting the provinces with addressing the shortage of teachers. But again, as with the point made with the higher education vote, once teachers are hired, it then again creates a future expenditure obligation. And also if the slower growth or reductions, the basic education will be under significant pressure. The other development in the basic education sector is the shifting of the ECD function from social development to the basic education vote. And the Commission is watching this development, and we are hopeful that with ECD forming part of the formal schooling system, that early learning will be afforded greater priority. Then we note the increases to the cooperative governance vote. The increases in respect of that vote is one of the key drivers of growth in the total allocation by vote. And here an additional funding of 28.9 billion is allocated, and it will largely be directed at transfers to municipalities in the form of the local government equitable share LAS allocation. And given the role of municipalities in the delivery of free basic services to indigent households, the Commission supports the protection of this funding. Moving to the next slide, please. Then alongside the increased funding for social protection programs, government has also utilized the additional revenue to improve funding to economic development departments. And this funding is largely in respect of infrastructure investment, thus reaffirming government's infrastructure-led approach to stimulating growth. And the notable allocations in this regard include an additional 5.3 billion to the water and sanitation vote, and this is largely to fund regional bulk infrastructure. And then also to the transport vote, where amongst other things, about 40 billion will be allocated to address the backlog in upgrading and refurbishing the national non-toll road network. On both these aspects, we note that, of course, water is critical for health reasons as well as economic development reasons. Likewise, with transport, good road infrastructure facilitates trade of goods and services. It's also critical for economic growth and development. So in both aspects, the Commission supports the targeting of funding towards these two votes. And of course, we need to keep an keen eye out on the rollout of these infrastructure projects, as we know that infrastructure management has been a long-standing challenge which can inhibit the possible gains that can be derived from infrastructure investment. Then with respect to job creation, the allocations are spread across a number of national departments, such as basic education. Also, we see funding in that respect for the trade industry and competition, as well as the employment and labor votes. And what we note in our submission is that the various job creation initiatives have produced job opportunities, and this obviously provides income relief for the recipients. However, these initiatives have not really changed the macro picture of unemployment, thus alluding to the need for government to address the underlying structural issues that drive the high unemployment rates. Then we've made a few recommendations with respect to this section. So overall, the Commission supports government's decision to prioritize funding for social protection and economic development. Again, we emphasize the need to keep in mind the temporary nature of the increased funding, and be aware that in some instances, as mentioned earlier, the additional funding for 2022-23 will create future expenditure obligations in certain sectors, and these sectors will come under significant pressure should revenue not recover. So we would advise departments to be aware of this potential threat and to be proactive in devising contingency plans to fund commitments should the need arise. We'd also like to emphasize the need for finalizing the higher education funding model with haste so that we do not endanger the protection of students at higher education learning institutions. The next slide is just, the slide covers the second Adjustments Appropriation Bill. As noted in the slide, the aim of the second Adjustments Appropriation Bill is to effect adjustments to the appropriation of money from the National Revenue Fund for expenditure that was approved in the 2021-22 financial year. In total, the adjustments amount to 18.6 billion. The bulk of that, 18.1 billion, is in respect of SASRIA to enable it to settle claims arising from the civil unrest that took place last year in July. And the Commission agrees with the support provided to SASRIA as the payment of claims is important to support the recovery of businesses, especially of small and medium-sized enterprises who were hard hit by the unrest. The second amount relates to 500 million in respect of the Department of Health for the COVID-19 vaccine program. And again, the Commission supports the spending as part of government's ongoing program to respond to and manage the COVID-19 pandemic. Chair, if I may hand over to Tando to take us through the next bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha, and thank you, Chair, and good morning, honorable members and colleagues who are present here on the platform. I'll be taking the honorable members through the last two sections of the presentation, touching on issues that relate to SOE financial performance, infrastructure investment, and the balance between recovery and sustainability of public finances. So starting with this slide, this table on this slide, it shows SOE guarantees and exposure as a percentage of GDP covering the period between 2017-18 and 2021-22. So what is worth mentioning is that government guarantees and exposure to SOEs are very high and represents a risk to the debt sustainability and also public finances. But in particular, Eskom guarantees and exposure, as you can see, are the highest, averaging over 5% of GDP over this period. So according to the 22 budget, contingent liabilities will reach 1.17 trillion or 18.11% of GDP because of SOE's weak cash flows and the tight borrowing conditions. So the sharp rise in contingent liabilities results from high government guarantees. And from the analysis that we've conducted, we've seen that contingent liabilities to SOEs account for half of the total contingent liabilities. The high guarantee to SOEs has a negative impact on government debt, as we've already said, and the analysis shows that if all SOE guarantees were to materialize, government debt will overshoot the 100% of GDP mark, and that underscores the agency and the need to reform SOEs and restructure them so that they are in a healthy financial situation. Next slide, please. So this slide speaks starts speaking to the financial performance of SOEs. This one relates to Eskom. So we've assessed the financial health of Eskom And we've analyzed its assets and liabilities and the net profit loss trends covering the period between 2017 and 2021. So this figure shows that Eskom's liabilities have increased from 534 billion in 2017 to 667 billion in 2019, while the assets have decreased from 882 billion in 2020 to 700 billion in 2021. So what is worth noting is that Eskom has also posted successive net losses over this period, which peaked at a net loss of 20.9 billion in 2019. This reflects a very weak financial performance and a very delicate financial health position for Eskom. Next slide. So in this slide, we've done the same kind of analysis, but now looking at Transnet and SABC. So we see on the figure on the left shows that Transnet assets have declined from 369 billion in 2018 to 336 billion in 2021, and Transnet has made a net loss of 8.4 billion in 2021 after having maintained successive net profits between 2017 and 2020. And then the figure on the right shows us that SAP liabilities have increased from 282 billion in 2017 to 384 billion in 2019. But what is also worth noting is that the SABC has consistently posted a net loss for the past 5 years that we looked at, and that the SABC net loss reached 1.03 billion in 2017 before declining to 524 million in 2021. This tells us that both Transnet and SABC financial performance is weak, and that their financial health position is fragile. Next slide. So after assessing the financial performance of this major SOE, we note 3 points. The first one is that the underperformance of SOEs is placing a heavy burden on the fiscus, and it highlights the need to address the root causes of the weakness in financial performance. The second one is that the poor health of SOEs is also reflected in the deterioration of the profitability and solvency ratio, which also speaks and strengthen the point that we've already made, that the financial performance of this institution is very weak. And then the third point is that the Commission welcomes the initiatives by government to address these weaknesses that are bedeviling the SOEs, including the initiative to establish a centralized shareholder model for the commercial SOEs, and also the initiative to publish a framework that will outline the criteria for government funding. And next slide. So we move on now to the next theme, which is looking at the public infrastructure investment. What is worth noting is that infrastructure investment, as honorable members will be aware, is critical for economic growth and development. So this graph shows infrastructure investment trends covering the period between 2018-19 and 2024-25. Looking at the 3 spheres of government, but also the public and private partnership, state-owned as well as state-owned companies. So the trend shows that infrastructure investment decelerated from 216 billion in 2018-19 to 187 billion in 2019-20. Infrastructure investment, however, increased to 249 billion in 2021-2022. Next slide. So the graph on this slide, it shows the share of infrastructure investment by the three spheres of government, as well as the public entities, public and private partnerships, and also SOEs. So the graph shows that the share of infrastructure investment by the three spheres of government, as well as the SOEs. What is worth mentioning is that in addition to the high shares of infrastructure investment by state-owned companies, the trends reflect that the state of the share of public entities in infrastructure spending has also increased. If you look at the shares there, the share has increased from 9.8% in 2021 to 13.6% in 2022-23, implying that government is increasingly depending on public entities and state-owned companies for infrastructure investment. Now, this is worrying for the Commission, because given the poor financial health position and the weak financial performance of public entities, as outlined in the slides previously, the Commission is worried about the return to investment of the infrastructure program and its sustainability in this context. And secondly, the share of local government in infrastructure investment is declining, and the Commission is concerned that this is happening in the context whereby infrastructure backlogs are still existing in municipalities. Next slide, please. So given the analysis above, the Commission makes the following recommendations. There are three in total. So the first one relates to the fact that the Commission recommends that government should assess SOEs in order to appraise their profitable feasibility, operational efficiency, their track record, and in resolving market failures and attaining developmental goals. Secondly, the Commission recommends that government should harmonize the legislative framework for SOEs in order to remove the legal ambiguity and reinforce implementation and proof disclosure of reporting requirements. And then finally, the Commission recommends that government implements the necessary operational and governance and financial reforms that will enable SOEs to effectively and efficiently deliver infrastructure in order to realize returns to investment. Next slide. So another important theme that we looked at is how the budget is balancing recovery and fiscal sustainability. So we note that given the key impact of COVID, the key imperatives are twofold. They relate to economic recovery and the stabilization of public finances. In this regard, overcoming COVID-19, protecting livelihood and supporting businesses have been prioritized by the budget. And we also note that the budget has placed emphasis on social recovery, boosting consumption and investment, while simultaneously retaining expenditure on the economic function, as my colleague Sasha has already alluded to. So there is a need to fully appreciate the bi-directional impact of these initiatives in order to inform the future fiscal framework. Next slide. So what we also note is that the composition of expenditure is not fully aligned to the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, the ERRP. The allocations by way of example, the allocations to manufacturing incentives for product and system development are projected to decrease by 9% and 6.3% over the MTEF respectively, yet these interventions are aimed at economic recovery. And then secondly, we note that the allocation to food security and agrarian reform program declines by 10.5%, yet the ERRP aims to support labor intensive sectors such as agriculture to achieve more inclusive growth. So with regards to infrastructure, our analysis also shows that infrastructure spending is characterized by delivery and management deficiencies. So the Commission then urges government to ensure that the infrastructure fund as a key instrument for the ERP is implemented within the parameters of the IGFR instruments through equitable and through equitable distribution of projects. So the recommendation, therefore, is that the budget process for 23-24 should focus on aligning the allocation to the economic recovery, reconstruction and recovery plan as informed by a comprehensive budget and expenditure review. At this time, I will hand over to our chairperson to go through our concluding remarks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Thando. In conclusion, Chairperson and members, the Commission supports Budget 2022 and government's continued commitment to consolidating public finances while providing support for the pandemic response, job creation, and social protection. The Commission further emphasized a number of points. One, in terms of South Africa's growth prospects, the Commission's view is that it is improbably or unlikely that the economy will return to pre-pandemic production levels within the year. Regarding revenue and tax policy, the Commission supports government's approach of focusing on broadening the tax base, improving administration, and lowering tax rates. The Commission welcomes as well government's decision to use a portion of the revenue windfall to lower the gross borrowing requirements and reducing debt issuances. However, the Commission cautions that debt stabilization risks remain elevated and pose significant challenges to public finances. The Commission supports the decision to use the revenue windfall to improve pro-poor allocations over the MTEV period. The Commission believes that this is an approach that does not jeopardize the path to deficit reduction and fiscal consolidation. It should be noted, though, that there are certain elements of funding within Budget 2022 which can create future funding obligations, such as NSFAS funding, as well as the hiring of additional teachers. Should revenue not recover, this will place departments under significant pressure. Next slide. The Commission applauds the efforts and outcomes associated with government's attempts, chairperson and members, to stimulate employment through numerous interventions. However, this has not changed the macro level picture of unemployment. In this regard, more significant structural reforms focus on artisanal skills are required to address unemployment in the long run. The Commission therefore welcomes and awaits the finalization of processes that are currently underway to find a more permanent alternative to the SRD grant. A key consideration for the Commission when evaluating a potential replacement will be the long-run viability and effects that a replacement will have on the fiscus. Given that the SRD grant will be stopped in March 2023, it will also be useful for the government to have a definitive timeline around this issue's decision-making process. Given the role that municipalities also play in delivering free basic services to indigent households, the Commission supports the growth in the allocation to this sphere. The Commission stresses the need for municipalities to improve the efficiency of spending and value for money. This must be done with the support of the national and provincial spheres of government through proper monitoring, reporting, and evaluation. Last slide. Finally, members, we believe as a Commission that fraud, corruption, and fiscal management in the form of fruitless and wasteful expenditure remain rampant. The government must take decisive and prompt actions against the perpetrators of these wastages and leakages to send a clear message that the government is serious about addressing this challenge. Regarding progress towards the goals of economic and social recovery alongside fiscal sustainability, the Commission is of the view that Budget 2022 has placed stronger emphasis on a people-centered budget by allocating over 1.1 trillion of the budget to social wage programs. Budget 2022 further provides for expenditure side economic recovery levers through the economic functions, which is set to receive 227 billion in 2022-23. Much emphasis of the spending is on infrastructure, and to this end, infrastructure management and delivery flaws are a key factor that hamper the potential gains to the economy, and that can be derived from infrastructure spending. So we need to have a more clear focus on containing our spending on infrastructure. And finally, the Commission also notes that there is a misalignment between the prioritization of spending within the economic function relative to the priorities identified as high impact job creation interventions in the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. This misalignment are namely in the infrastructure rollout, localization through industrialization, and food security. That concludes our presentation, Chairperson, and we await any comments from the House.
Thank you, Dr. Mava and your team for that presentation. Honorable members, it's our turn now to interact with the presentation as done by FFC. Can I get names of honorable members who would like to interact with the presentation? You know how we do it.
Chair, it's Honorable Sarupan, please.
Honorable Sarupan.
Matafa.
Honorable Matafa.
Honorable Dikhale.
Honorable Dikhale.
Peters.
Honorable Peters.
Mare.
Honorable Mare.
Kaiso.
Honorable Kaiso. Okay, honorable members, let's try to keep it within 5 minutes. Honorable Sarupan, can you start, please?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, I'm just going to hone in on everything from slides 21 onwards around state-owned companies. And let's start with the guarantees to state-owned companies. I see that as per the FFC's slide, which is very informative. And the first time I think we've seen this data consolidated into a single piece of information that we can actually look at, that the contingent liabilities account for 18.11% of GDP. And Eskom, of course, being the biggest one there at 5.6% of GDP. And one of the things the FFC recommends is that they highlight the urgency and importance of reforming SOEs in light of the immediate risk they pose to the fiscus. I think that's very, very fair comments. And I'd like to know from the FFC what they think the necessary reforms are required for SOEs from their perspective, and what steps they would recommend the state take to stabilize and reform SOEs. Then just in terms of Eskom's fiscal performance, which they use as a case study, which was, I think, particularly useful. I think that what is very disturbing there, Chair, this is just a comment, is that how quickly the net asset value of Eskom declined over a couple of years, particularly in 2019, when it dipped below 100 billion rand. I think it is in the 2021 financial year, they have it as just over 200 billion, but the liabilities, of course, are very, very high. So that becomes a very, very serious concern there. And I think we've seen similar with Transnet and SABC. And then on public infrastructure investment, Chair, I note that the FFC has pointed out that local government has massively reduced its investment into public infrastructure investments, and that this is a cause for concern. I'd just like to get an understanding from the FFC as to how this correlates with financial allocations to local governments, and if they're of the view that the allocations to local government has slowed in the last couple of years to help bail out national government, as well as to cover the rising costs of debt, and if it is necessary for the state to begin to curtail that debt in order to begin to ensure that its local and provincial governments are able to make public infrastructure investments. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Sarupen Oromlatafa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members, Dr. Mava and the FFC team. Let me first start by thanking the presentation. It's really empowering and will assist in us going forward. Chair, I just have a few questions, and one will be on the first input that Chen made in terms of the Central Bank of the United States as well as of England as far as the increment on the repo rates. Now, the question that I have, in the media, there is talk that the monetary policy of the country is also likely to increase interest rates. Now, the question is there any relation to this move by these international central banks? And also, is it in relation to the already elevated inflation levels that we see linked to the Russia-Ukraine situation? And what measures can the government put in place to ensure that while the Reserve Bank is increasing interest rates, the impact is not dire for ordinary South Africans? The second point, Chair, is on the issue of the COVID-19. Has the FFC done a thorough study to determine the impact that COVID-19 has had on the fiscal sustainability? And to what extent has it influenced this particular appropriations bill that is before us? And if that has been done, considering the fact that we are also faced with rising debt service costs and elevated cost of borrowing, what can government do to create capacity and better be able to address economic shocks while preserving fiscal sustainability? The third point, Chair, is on the issue of the floods experienced in KZN. We all know that KZN is the second largest contributor to the country's GDP. and the recent floods would have disrupted consumer and business activity. How notable or significant will this impact of the floods be on the overall South African economy, particularly its outlook? And what measures can government implement to ensure that it responds adequately to issues of climate change? I'm raising this, Chair, because many speakers are actually placing the blame of the floods in KZN on issues of climate change. Now, I think that calls for government to respond in line with the prevailing conditions as far as how the weather responds to the new climate change and the impact that it has. The last point, Chair, is on the stated windfall from current commodity booms. Now, for me, where I'm sitting, I think this is temporary. And from the little knowledge that I have, is that it is linked to the developments in the European space, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Should this war come to an abrupt end and this commodity boom is no longer present, what actions does government need to take immediately to increase its revenues, considering that we are near the end of term for the NDP, whereby we envisaged 5% plus economic growth? How can government ensure that at least we move as close as possible to that particular economic growth of 5% plus without this particular commodity boom in the event that they are no longer there? I will pause there, Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. Thank you once again, Dr. Mava and the team.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa. Honorable Tehale.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning to everybody. Allow me, Chair, to switch off my video.
Honorable Tehale, just keep your video on. We hear you very well. If you are struggling, then we can say switch it off.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me take this opportunity and thank Dr. Mava this morning and Team FFC for their presentation, which is a good music to our ears. I think if what they are saying can really put to practice, then it will assist many, especially in the rural areas. Chairperson, I have heard that they have touched on this issue of moving the ECDs from social development to Department of Basic Education. I just want to check, because we've been hearing about this. I'm checking if ever this is going to start as a pilot project. If yes, where or on which side of the country? And if it's not going to start as a pilot project, it's just going to move to the department so that they put it into practice. Are they going to monitor so that even the ECDs in the rural areas are being covered? I am saying this, Chairperson, because well, we keep on talking about the effect of COVID-19 into our country, but COVID in the rural areas, when it arrives, it found that people are struggling. They are not working, they are poor, and when it comes to the kids, their parents are receiving social grant, and with that little, they try to share it with the ECD mothers that are taking care of their children. Even if they're not working, now it's fashionable that even if you're not working, the children must grow in an area where they will be able to be taught how to use their fingers and so on, so that when they go to school, they don't struggle. So my question is, how is this going to be monitored? And on the issue of social intervention when it comes to relieving the poor and the vulnerable, where they rely on security grant, especially given the detrimental effects of the past. I also want to check, actually my questions are the same. We are here, it's happening, but in the rural areas, it's just chaos, it's problems. And these problems are continuing because at first or way back, these vulnerable and poor will receive something from social development whereby it will assist them after school. They will via to a certain area whereby they will get whatever is prepared for their stomach and to be assisted with homeworks and assignments. And those who are heading their family, the child-headed families, they will then get even something so that they will put on the table before they sleep or eat before they sleep. So I just want to check, is the same question actually, that how are they going to be monitored that this is happening even in the rural areas? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Tikhale. Honorable Peters, please come in.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Now what's happening?
We can hear you. We can see you.
Yeah, but my screen is just black.
On our side,
Okay,
we can-
Chairperson.
Okay. Continue, Honorable Peters. Honorable Tikhale, please. Honorable Peters, come in.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
There's Honorable Mareo, whose mic is also open. Chairperson, thank you very much. I can see you now. Thank you very much to the FFC for the presentation, and once more, good morning to all members of the committee. I just want to find out from the FFC, I'm not going to make a reference to particular slides, but I think the FFC would relate to the issues that I'm going to raise. One is with regard to, and I think Honorable Matafa slightly touched on it, the comparison of the US and UK to South Africa. For me, it seems to be an unfair comparison, Chairperson. Is there no situation where the FFC can do a like-for-like options, especially when you consider the issue of the repo rate or the interest rate? Yeah, not for a lack of a better word, I know it's called the monetary policy. And is it, for example, looking at monetary policies of BRICS or the top 5 countries in the continent of Africa, or maybe in the developing world? Sometimes I think comparing South Africa to the UK creates a very high benchmark. Countries that have been in operation and developed for more than 200 years, and Sisakasa, and I'm not saying that because Sisakasa that is justifiable, but I think the comparison will help us as members of this committee to see whether there's improvement or not. Chairperson, I just want to ask the FFC, according to them, what could be done to save some of the SOCs that are still in the green and orange, to take those who are in the orange to green? And because for me, it is important that we get an understanding of some of the SOCs that, like one of the colleagues have indicated, needs to be reformed. Some of them needs to be merged. Which ones do you think that the Pierre Commission report, its recommendations should be implemented on? You remember the commission that was looking at the SOCs in the period between 2009 and 2010. And considering the situation prevailing in some of the SOCs, what, in the opinion of the FFC, should be done to ensure that the services they provide are not compromised or allowed to fail, and that the users at lower level, for example, we've been hearing about the electricity challenges for a very long time, and we are told we are going to live with these challenges for a long time, because the infrastructure that we have, is it in the rail sector, but also in the electricity sector, is very old. And there is a balancing act government needs to make it possible that you provide the grants, you provide the free water for the indigent and electricity, you provide child support grants, you provide grants for the aged, and now the SRD grant, and now there's an appeal for an extension of this SRD, but in a better form or more, or increase it to probably a BIG. So the issue of the balancing act in terms of investing in the SOC's infrastructure that has decayed at an accelerated rate, because it would mean they need to accelerate it. And remember, some of the challenges that we have in our communities, like for example, in the Northern Cape, in Kimberley, when they repair, like from tomorrow, the water will be closed till Sunday to repair certain pipes. We know for sure that on Monday or Sunday evening, the water will not be back, because the other areas are going to start popping, because the new infrastructure is now so powerful for the old that is connected to it, that, like they say, you don't put fresh wine in old skin, but it bursts, and that is what is happening in our communities. Unfortunately, the local sphere of government, as well as national and provincial, is not communicating the challenges of the infrastructure related interruptions from time to time. Now it looks like more on the inefficient government. Whilst, yes, we've got challenges of corruption, we've got challenges of inefficiency or capacity here and there, but in some instances, it is this infrastructure that is so decayed that it cannot carry the new loads that is put into it. So there was a time where the FFC supported devolution of functions, but not mentioning anything about the budget that would follow those functions. I know that it was one of the things that in my previous life, I had to deal with it, where the FFC had written a letter in support of a municipality to ask for particular services that they believe that belong into that municipality. And I just want to find out another question, Chair. I might sound as a broken record. Last week, I asked National Treasury and also PBO, the issue related to the capacity of SANRAL to support provinces with regard to roads infrastructure. What is the view of the FFC with regard to this? Again, I will mention my province, the Northern Cape. There is a dam emerging, a dam of wastewater that comes from the municipality through a place called Hoha Farm. That water used to be sold to mines and at a nominal amount to mines and the agricultural sector. It is no longer happening. Now it has dammed, it has destroyed the road, and now people who used to pay 80 rand from Bob Batley and Delport's Hope and all those areas to get to Kimberley are now having to pay 200 rand because the road has been diverted to go via the N12 onto the Windsorton Road, then to Batley West. So even the poorest of the poor, imagine a pensioner who used to, after pension, go and shop at the supermarkets in Kimberley can't do that anymore because the cost of transport has gone up. What is the view of FFC with regard that particular function, which is will help the provinces with the capacity that SANRAL has to be able to make sure that they can build better quality road. There is reports with regard to the 750,000 kilos of roads in South Africa, where it shows that more than 10% are actually very, very good roads in the hands of SANRAL, and the very good ones are also in the hands of SANRAL, as well as the good ones, 30% of the good ones. So it actually tells you that the vision of the Mandela administration to create an agency like SANRAL was to make sure that these roads can be uniform, and I mean of the same standard. The people in Chairperson, I'm not diverting, the people in Kuruman once, John Talohan once said that the people in Gauteng have got 5 roads going that way and 5 roads going this way, the south and the northbound. So they want one that they can cross in the middle and create a one road, but it must be very good. So I think it is important that we understand roads actually enable socio-economic development. They enable access to education. Lastly, Chairperson, the education outcomes. Have FFC ever done a study on the amount of budget that is allocated to the education sector? Now I'm speaking about from ECD right up to higher education, whether it is value for money. When we are told that we've got this number of young people who are unemployed, not because they don't have the qualification, but the quality of their qualification, the skills that they have don't seem to match what the economy needs. So I think it is important that we hear from FFC. Did you ever, as the Finance and Fiscal Commission, look at whether we do get value for money? Are you working together with DPME with regard to evaluation and monitoring the rands and cents that are being spent in the education sector? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Peters. Honorable Mare, please come in. Honorable Mare.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
I will cut it short. My question was also about the SOECs and the guarantees, and I was covered by our colleagues Suripan and Peters on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mare. Honorable Gaiso.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Let me also thank the presentation made by the FFC. Indeed, it was quite interesting and quite helpful for the committee. Chair, let me start here on the issue raised by FFC around in fact, it was said previously during their presentation that the issue around the impact of the conflict in Ukraine. But where I'm getting to is the impact once more that now, as well as the decision of the US Federal Bank and the UK, my colleague Oscar Matava has pointed out that one. It has actually resulted in the price increase in retail foods and higher oil prices. Now I want, as well as services. Now, I just want to check from FFC, have you made your because I want to believe that once we make reference to oil price increase and retail goods price increase in services, obviously we're referring to the most vulnerable and the poor, who will be at the, who are going to be mostly affected by this price increase. Have you made your research or studies as to what an extent can the government, for instance, come in as far as price increases? Remember that there is no date of the conflict. When is it going to end? There is no date. And actually, because of that conflict, obviously the developed countries like US and like UK have actually moved to, in a direction that would, benefit their profitability of capital. So the easiest way is to simply go to, this drive of, high oil price and increase of interest rates, etc., looking at their own economy, not bothering themselves with the third developed countries like the Honorable Tipu has said. So what measures do you think, or have you made a research that the government can make a cushion given this developed situation? It's a global development that sees the conflict in the Ukraine, so that we are not going to be found wanting at the end of the day. I'm saying this given the level of high employment in the country, which has now expanded to way above 40% in the expanded terms. And so it creates a very serious problem for the people to survive under this circumstance. So what sort of a research we have done around it, so that perhaps it should be able to guide and assist us moving forward, so that we don't wait for an explosion of situation, because that where there's situations in various countries where there's high level of price, oil price and food price increase, and services were not affordable, it ended up in a very unintended situation. And now let me go to this point on the state-owned companies. And you say that now you have discovered that now there is malalignment in as far as economic function is concerned to the proper implementation or to realize the objective of economic recovery plan. So now I think for the committee it's very much important that now we should make it a resolution that now the economic composition of economic function should be aligned in such a way that it also talks to the economic recovery plan moving forward, as recommended by the Commission in the 2023-24 budget. So otherwise, we are going to be doing a mad time with this good plan. And thirdly, I want to come to the issue of that we've talked about in as far as foreign direct investment. Now, given that private sector should play a very critical role in as far as also assisting the government in as far as a rollout of infrastructure program, but then there is this phenomenon of investment boycott. Now, I want to understand from the FFC, how would this now happen in the light of the economic, investment boycott or investment strike by the foreign companies or by the private sector, in fact, which would assist in and unlocking service delivery, because service delivery, as you say, or you presented in your slide, says it also relies in as far as, you know, the private sector also playing their role as a private sector in the investment to enhance service delivery. Not only the government, but private sector also coming in very strongly. But now I'm saying in the light of investment strike, how would this actually happen? What is your opinion around this? Do you see this actually realizing this objective as FFC? Now, with I think on number of government mahutas who have been, there has been a resolution or a commitment to ensure that artisanal skills, you know, become a key focus in ensuring job creation and unemployment in the future. But this one seems to be a goal which we cannot be realized very easily. I mean, there are community colleges which are being built or have been built, but it does seem to be still a challenge that to can realize this, you know, noble, you know, decision to make sure that artisanal skills are being built. So now, what is the challenge in as far as FFC is concerned around this? Because I don't think it's a very new resolution, this one. It has been there, but it's like there is something that is causing a stumbling block that this should not be realized. Yeah. So lastly, Chair, is on the no, I think, Chair, let me pause at this stage. Perhaps I'll come back if there's any other issue that I want to raise. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. Let me just check. Do I have any other oral member who would like to pose a question, a comment before I come in?
No, Chair. Good morning, but I'm fine, Chairperson.
Okay, Honorable Lenzana, thank you. Let me come in. Dr. Mava and Team FFC, thank you very much for the presentation. My first question, when you look at your gross fixed capital formation slide, it's public corporations who are leading with in investment. The president has been having a lot of investment conferences, and a lot of companies have come up and said they're going to come and invest, but we seem not to see it on your slide. What is happening? Would you like to comment on that, Chen? I don't see it coming. Is it perhaps those commitments are never actualized? Yeah, I think that's one thing. Perhaps with that, you remember that the corporate income tax has been decreased by 1 percentage point. Do you expect to see that translating into any form of a gross fixed capital formation and therefore employment creation? What's your view on SASRA, the second adjustment appropriation bill? You can see that SASRA is coming for recapitalization. Remember, only 2 provinces were affected by this unrest. It has always been argued that SASRA is a healthy organization, but there it came to 2 provinces. This is supposed to be a national organization. You had 2 provinces affected by the unrest, and then you had SASRA coming to government for recapitalization. It's like insurance is when insurance must come after having taken premiums and so on, and when it must meet its obligation, it goes to a big shareholder. How would you define the problem of SASRA? Number 3, despite many recapitalization programs of government to Eskom, the balance sheet keeps on weakening. Is that a fact? Which I think yes. And why is it weakening when the shareholder is busy putting money into Eskom? What do you think the problem is? Next question. FFC welcomes the centralized shareholder model for the SOEs. I would like to hear you. Why are you welcoming it? How do you see it improving management of SOEs? Aren't you seeing perhaps there's a school of thought which says it's one bureaucracy on top of the other bureaucracy, and then there's also a government department responsible for this. How do you see this improving the performance of SOEs in general, and perhaps Eskom, Transnet, and SABC in particular? What is it that the boards with their governance structures can't do, which must be done by this centralized shareholder model? A general question. Do you think that the budget, the appropriation bill as presented here, supports economic transformation? If the answer is yes, and I think that's what we have said before, you know that the indicators, the economic indicators have been going the wrong direction. Whether you are looking at poverty, you are looking at inequality, you are looking at unemployment rates, they're all going in the wrong direction. What is it that is not being done properly? Or perhaps I'm going to argue that the problem is not money there. If that's your position, what is the problem? Why are we not able to achieve these broad national imperatives of reducing unemployment, of reducing poverty, and of reducing inequality? You know that the World Bank has said recently that our country, South Africa, is the most unequal society. And you know exactly what that means for the people of South Africa. And you know that inequality goes along racial lines, and unequal societies are known to be very unstable societies. And unstable societies have got a problem in attracting in investment, knowing that capital is very mobile these days. So I'm saying, what do you think the problem is in as far as economic transformation is concerned, or perhaps the appropriation bill that we're dealing with? Dr. Mava and your team, please respond to the questions, and then you'll bring back the meeting to us once your team has finished responding to the issues and the questions that you are raising. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chairperson and honorable members, for the pertinent questions and the issues that have been raised. One of the comments which have been raised, I do believe that as South Africa, we should be aware of the global outlook and the impact of the decisions which are made in the Northern Hemisphere, and that ultimately, though, we should peg ourselves on the emerging markets, and especially the economies, actually, that are in Africa. That is where we should peg ourselves as South Africa, given our unique circumstances. Members, we have expert opinions from the other commissioners. Commissioner Mukadi, I believe, is on the platform, and Commissioner Kawe. And we also have the researchers, the research heads, and the researchers who have done extensive work on some of these questions which have been asked. I'd like to find out from Commissioner Mukadi and Commissioner Kawe if they want to take a stab on any of the questions, if they're available. And then after that, I would like to give an opportunity to the researchers to answer in detail some of the comments. Commissioner Mukadi, I see you on the platform.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to the Honorable Chair and Honorable members. If it is okay, I'd like to switch off my camera. I've got a very unstable internet line at the moment, please. Yes, just a few questions that I'd like to respond to. Maybe the last one, starting from the chairperson, about whether there are economic reforms that have translated into through the budget. In other words, whether we're seeing any value through this budget. I think the difficulty is that, Honorable Chair, you spot on about unemployment, inequality, and poverty, which continues to undermine whatever efforts have been done in trying to present a budget that hopefully would have an impact. And we agree with you with regard to that. But there is no one specific problem that we can really say this is actually the cause. There are several issues that go to that, and some of your members have already raised the issue. Do we really get a value for money if we have a rand? Do we really get the full benefit of that? And we all know that the answer is not at all. Part of our contribution as the FFC was to commission a paper on corruption, which we believe is one of the causes of the problem. As I said, it's not the only one. But if we could get that part right, hopefully we will see our budget yielding greater results and contributing immensely into the issues of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. So very soon we would be publishing that paper. We have various legislation and various instruments that attempt to stem the tide. Recently, we also have the Zondo Commission and so forth, but we're looking at it from the point of view of changing the mindset of society and changing the subculture that has even gone as far as to undermine those very instruments and legislation that attempts to reduce or deal with corruption. And then I'm sure my other colleagues would then add to that, to various other issues that they do see as undermining economic transformation as presented through the budget. And then the issue of SOEs that has been raised, I think, by Honorable Sarupen and Honorable Peters and other members. It's again a broken record that we've not really seen any value. We've continued to pump in money into those SOEs. We have raised the issue previously that it's got to do with financial performance, poor performance, and weakness in governance and so forth. These have been raised from time to time. But in our paper submission, we suggest that hopefully the centralized shareholder model could hopefully bring the reform that we expect to contribute in stemming that tide, together with the publication of the criteria of the framework for government funding with regard to SOEs. But having said that, that would not stop there, because we still would not know what the efficacy of those models would be. there's a requirement by Parliament through its portfolio committees to play that role of oversight from time to time, so that we don't wait until all damage is done, but periodically, from time to time, intervention is made by Parliament through asking the relevant questions, so that those who are not rising to the occasion are brought to account, and we don't really end up with an escalating and a runaway problem that we can't resolve. And I think there was an issue raised about the quality of education by Honorable Peters, and I think and I think also is it Honorable Dekale raised the issue of ECD. The FFC had paid particular attention to the issue affecting ECD, because we realized that unless we have a proper foundation at the level of ECD, and there is a maximum access to in ECD structures, if we don't get that one right, problems would then arise at high up in the education ladder, at primary, at high school, including at university, and resolving those problems then at that level would be much more expensive than if we had invested enough, the minimum at ECD that is required. We've not really got that one right as we speak, but we have already made submissions in that regard. The issue of migration from, as raised by Honorable Khale, to the Department of Basic Education from Social Development. We've made a contribution, but I think it is okay to acknowledge that the Education Department itself has not produced the kind of quality education that we all had expected to be. And we can't sort of take it for granted that through this migration, absorbing the ECD, things would then automatically run free. We do not know, run smoothly. We do not know exactly the level of preparedness by the Department of Department of Basic Education, and this would obviously be teething problems for them. But as we continue, we would then again expect that Parliament would then have to play that role of monitoring and evaluation and constantly asking the right questions, because we can't afford to get that one wrong. It's a critical stage in the history of our education. We've not had that experience before, and therefore there would be teething problems, like I had said. The issue of rural ECD schools, it's also a difficult one. We know that the rural areas always get the raw end of the stick in terms of access to resources. One example in the ECD is that registration had always been very difficult. So you'd find a lot of informal ECDs that do not get subsidies or support from government simply because they've not been registered. But we have, but at the moment, through FFC submissions, registration process have been eased and softened and to allow for greater access, so that those that have been marginalized, such as in the rural areas, can then gain access to ECD. But the problem again would be implementation, and it requires constant evaluation, monitoring from time to time, for which again we would expect Parliament to play that particular role. Going back to issue of education. Oh, all right. Maybe before I step off on the ECD, I think Sasha, if possible, would then provide more detail in terms of timelines for that migration and the implementation process with regard to that, in order to provide additional response to Honorable Dikhale, through you, Chair. And then I think Honorable Peters, as well as Honorable Kaisa, raised the issue of artisanal skills. Surely it's a bigger weakness that we have in the system of education at the moment, because previously in the apartheid state, we did have a very, very functional artisan skills programs that is very functional and very effective, and for some reason through the TVET colleges, we've not really managed to hone into that infrastructure that was there. The reforms and changes that we brought about have greatly undermined the programs of artisan skills that artisan training that was available at the time. And we've not really exploited that opportunity that we had before. Therefore, this is why in our submission we recommend structural reform with regard to that, and unless that is really addressed, unemployment, especially for young people, and we estimate in terms of the expanded definition of unemployment is about 46.6. And this is really a time bomb. Artisanal skills are very useful, and one does not really have to present a very glowing CV. If you have a function at home, you've got guests, and suddenly there's a burst pipe, all you need is, and water is gushing all over, all you need is somebody who can fix a problem, and you pay that person at the time. And this is really just, I'm sorry to mention that simplistic example, but it really just shows that people with those kind of skills do not really necessarily have to line up in queues and present lots of glowing CVs, but the job gets to be done, and then this can go a long way in reducing unemployment and reducing poverty. Thank you very much, Dr. Mbaba.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Mukadi. Commissioner Kawe, any thoughts you want to share before I give the baton to the research team?
Yes, Chair, I would. Good morning, honorable members. Good morning to the FFC team, and thank you for the great presentation. I wanted to touch on the issue of Sasria.
Commissioner?
Hello?
Yes, do you mind showing yourself? Perhaps you can switch off after that.
Okay. Just give me a minute. I'm working from alone.
It's okay if you can't. You can proceed. Yeah, that's
okay. All right. So I wanted to address the issue of Sasria, to say before the looting, Sasria only had about 20 people working in their claims department. So when the looting started and the claims started to come in, they had to go back because their salary budget did not allow them to hire more people.
Commissioner, pardon me for interfering again. Your video, it cuts you right in the middle. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, so Sasria then had to go ask for more money because they did not have enough salary budget to deal with the claims, and they did not have enough loss adjusters. And also there were some fraudulent claims that were made that came in. And I think by mid-September, they had already paid about 12.6 billion. So the issue of Sasria had more to do with capacity than them not having enough funds. I also wanted to touch on the SOEs to say that your ESCOMs, especially ESCOM, has to resolve their maintenance issues, because municipalities would claim that if ESCOM gives them so much megawatts of electricity, they only receive half of what ESCOM claims to have given them because of distribution losses. And therefore, we have to do intensive, or ESCOM has to do intensive maintenance to make sure that what they distribute is what the municipality gets, so that there are no disagreements between ESCOM and the municipalities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Kawe. I would like to hand over to our head of research and the team to take us through some of the questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. And again, thank you, Honorable Chair members, for the well-placed questions. Let me run right through it. Chairperson said regarding the gross fixed capital formation, why is this still low, and why there seems to be a hesitancy in terms of private sector coming to the party. I think it's that two factors. One is that the world of investment and capital formation infrastructure, these are long-term investment plans, right? And they are long-term investment vehicles. They don't happen just in the morning as we roll off the bed. It's going, once you lock into the contract or lock into the investments, it will only be profitable if you remain within it for some time. And so what that means is they approach it with extreme caution, of course. And so they would look at the track record of the government, track record of the policy positions that has been undertaken, and then see has the policies and the positions of the public sector and governments been consistent, it's been well with good rationale, and those sort of low risk and low uncertainty that would encourage their investments. And so they watch it very carefully, as well as remember that the world of investment is open and wide. So if they don't invest here, they can very well, the investors could very well go somewhere else. And precisely bringing me to the earlier points regarding when somewhere else, international, in the US or the UK, other countries, they may have increased the yield or the returns on their investments, then of course the investors will flock over there, over to that for the lower risk, higher return investments. And so this is, I think, one, those two factors driving the investments dynamics that is, they look at South Africa, and then they will look at it and see if it makes good sense to stay within it. And this includes, of course, the corporate income tax. Imagine that today we sadly hear that I want to invest, and the tax is lowered. I want to invest, but I also need to see how temperamental that tax relief would remain. And if I think that the credibility of that tax decrease is will be temperamental or short-term or short-lived, and that I don't know where, if the tax might increase or it might be lowered even more, and so forth. Even all those uncertainties will build towards my investment decision, and so that those dynamics is what ultimately is, I think, holding the investors back, especially given the current global as well as domestic environments of investments. One day I want to invest, but suddenly I hear the government wants to move towards a particular, extreme or radical policy. That's also a risk for me, that deters me from wanting to put my money in. Please pardon the sort of the very colloquial language I'm using here, but this is really how the investors think. And then Sasria, such a question is addressed very well by a commissioner, and the why is the balance sheet keep getting worse? Apart from, as Commissioner Kawe very well alluded to, it's really about the business model of these SOCs. And apart from those operational sort of deficiencies and disparities there, I would also add, if I draw my experience as an accounting officer, is those contracts, especially those contracts that are multi-year, multi-million and billions, those contracts that are incredibly sticky to transform or to amend, because obviously we can't, even reform is to take place, and maybe a contract that is not value for money and that needs to be cancelled, you can't cancel it outright. So you have to go through a lot of processes and also a lot of obstacles to get it off the books. And so this is, I think it's all of it points towards this. There are these reforms that are on the strategic agenda, but also it's another thing to especially look out for these contracts and the current operational issues that are embedded in the processes. And this centralized shareholder model ultimately is, the Commission is encouraging this sort of accountability, motivating, shall we say, management and ownership. So through ownership. So what exactly that is saying is that, Professor, as you observed, Honorable Chair, it just seems like people come and then they, the company could be going downhill, uphill, but generally when it goes downhill and then they just leave with no cost to the person, him or herself. And I think that is the ultimate, what this proposal is saying is that once that person joins, there should be that sense of accountability. You're accountable for the operations and the performance of that SOC for that period, and going forward. And the only thing I think that anybody can do or should do in that situation is just to own up and fix the problems and face up to those the accountabilities and the responsibilities and role that comes with the job. And is this appropriation bill presented here supports economic transformation? However, outcomes is adverse in trending. So I think at this point, as alluded to also from our various submissions to Parliament and committees, is that appropriation in the sense of the macro allocation, right? The fiscal allocation of resources nationally raised or otherwise, is actually not really the problem. There is enough money floating around. I think the problem here is the within misallocation. So once, say, a department receives the money, the within misallocation, where such as Sasria didn't have enough COE, or another function that maybe don't have enough equipment, or a core business function that is not only receiving a minor portion of the department's budgets or the organization's budgets, those issues. Notwithstanding, of course, further to that also is then the spending and the execution of the budgets that is of issue. It's strange, but I see that, or we see that generally there would be budget, but spending is not there to support the future allocation of that municipality, for instance, as the honorable member has also alluded to. Moving up one to first, if I may address, I absolutely agree with Honorable Peters. It is unfair. It is unfair because, like I alluded to last time, the fact that Russia was only downgraded to junk once it has entered into that's called a conflict with another country. Its investment grade was only then, downgraded to that extent. Versus South Africa, we were already fallen into the junk grade. And I think, yes, there are, the investors again will tell you it's all about risk and reward and so forth, and South Africa is of higher risk and so forth. But I think there is a slight part of, it's just bizarre in that rationale or that framework of risk and reward when you are comparing a country that is at war versus another country that is not at war. I think the comparison is just totally unfair. And it's in that unfairness that I propose presented also regarding the monetary policy. Let me just be clear. Through research and also the and I brought up the example of Turkey and also the other sort of monetary policy decisions around the world, is that I think it's misapplied. It's a policy decision made in error to try and address inflation, forget about whether it's core or non-core, what is the cause of it, but it's trying to address a supply side caused inflation, pushed inflation, we call it in economics, with a monetary policy tool or policy tool that is effective much more directly on a demand pool inflation. So I think in that misapplication, what I was pointing out, what we're pointing out here is that this misapplication, error or not, and this is the second part, which is again unfair towards South Africa, is that because of how open the investment world is and this the risk and reward structure is for investment, is that South Africa is really put in a position that is incredibly difficult, that if we don't, obviously, if we do, right, our interest rate is going to go up. All cost of money, essentially, of our currency is going up. But at the same time, if we don't, then we might follow in the same suit as something like Turkey, where just around the time during and after COVID, they instead of increasing interest rates, watching inflation and watching those interest rate of other countries, instead they decreased their rates. And then what happened was the rand, the lira depreciated, and all of those effects kicks in and causing in this case, if we bring that example back to South Africa, the risk ultimately is that our rand depreciates so much that our redemption schedule of our debt, which is all denominated in US dollars. I think there is only one small item that is still denominated in Japanese yen, but all of those costs on debt and financing debt and redeeming debt will escalate a lot. And at the same time, not forgetting that whilst this suddenly the advanced economies or other countries' investment vehicles now suddenly seem much more attractive for investors to invest in. So capital will shift in that direction, and resulting in us sitting nothing with no resources except just pieces of paper that is called rand, South African rand. So that is the risk and the dynamics that is incredibly unfair, and also a risk for us, financial and fiscal risk for us. I shall move also Honorable Peter's very good question about capacity of Central. I'll be quick. Because South Africa is quite big, roads, it stretches kilometers, right? Thousands and tens of thousands and so forth. The issue, the trick here, we believe, is really about this data-informed monitoring, evaluation of road conditions. Obviously, not all roads can be, top of the grade line and of say 5 lanes, parallel to each other roads. So one has to really maintain and repair those based on demand and conditions of the road. Educational outcome, yes, as earlier Commissioner Mokali has said, this year especially we do have in the 23-24 divisional review, which we will table just at the end of the month. There is a chapter wholly dedicated to this issue of educational outcome in relation to budget cuts and value for money. And here we use, just to ensure the quality assure on this research in particular, we're working with NT for the personnel data, which is on the salary data of the teachers, and COE costs, as well as a DBE on the educational outcomes. Honorable Matafa, those impacts from outside, again, what is the space for us to maneuver, policy-wise and otherwise? So obviously we all now know that it is a price side effect. It's very, this is what Commission is suggesting is, we see a problem, and then that problem is inflation. But it's even more important to understand what is the nature of this problem. Clearly, we're saying that first differentiating between whether it's cost push, supply push, or is it demand pull inflation, and then understanding that, then we can apply and apply the right tools to the problem. To the correct problem, and to address it correctly, and as well as these what other policies and what happens if the war comes to an end and so forth, and what to do about these financial and fiscal sustainability issues. At the end of the day, really, it's I struggle to find a better term, but to just say, we have to self-improve and become more self-reliant. If you look and go through all of the channels and sequence of economic indicators and effects, it's dangerous for us to be dependent on external forces, as you pointed out, regarding the unfairness that we feel from the world, and as well as the inefficiencies within our domestic economy that needs a speedy, very, very quick, we need to eliminate it, and also increase own productivity, and I think finally I want to say, with regards to when people think about jobs, it's about education, it's about those skills developments. We
Mr. Cheng,
over the past,
switch off your video. We're now losing you.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Chair. Hope this gets better. My final point is just that it's really now the focus really should be put on the demand side of the labor market instead of constantly supply side or education, right? Labor force participation rates and those things. The focus is on the demand side, and what that means is really the structural reforms within the industries and the value chains. And you will remember the Commission, we said the localized product value chain approach. It's really about changing the way of business and the value chain proposition and position and the strategic alignments of that within our industries to increase ultimately employment, and then we can talk earnings and purchasing powers and standard of living for our people. Let me, if I may, hand over quickly to Sasha and Tando for those relevant short responses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm covered on all the education-related questions, except to indicate that the migration of ECD from social development to basic education is already underway, and the Minister of DBE is or was responsible for ECD as of 1st of April 2022. Yeah, that was just to add on to Prof. Mukadi's input on ECD. Thank you.
Thank you. Tando?
Thank you. Thank you, Chen, and thank you, Chairperson, again for the opportunity. I think I'm largely covered in as far as the SO issues are concerned by the commissioners and as well as the head of research, Chen. But I just want to make a comment with regards to a question that was raised in relation to infrastructure. The point that we're making, that infrastructure investment has been declining with regards to local government. So what I just want to say is that the implementation of the fiscal consolidation exercise, we've seen that it has targeted infrastructure spending. So what has happened and what the implication of that is that less resources have been made available to municipalities to pay for the maintenance of the existing infrastructure and also to provide new infrastructure for the basic services that they are rendering to the communities. So in such a context, and whereby you already have a backlog of infrastructure, it means that the amount of the things that the municipalities have to do in order to get rid of backlog, it really becomes even more insurmountable given the resources, the legal resources that is made available to them. So I just wanted to clarify that. And maybe also just to add that what we're saying with regards to the centralized shareholder model for SOEs, the way we understand it is that we will have a controlling a company that will be able to form or to consist of a pool of experts that can thoroughly look at corporate governance issues at OSOFI and how the current difficulties that we've already explained can be resolved when it comes to SOEs. So issues of accountability and consequence management needs to be looked at thoroughly, and we think that this body, which will consist of experts, will thoroughly look at these issues across all the SOEs and not just a few specific SOEs. So there will be a comprehensive diagnosis exercise that will look at how we can resolve the issues that are currently characterizing our SOEs. Thanks, Chair. Let me end here.
Thank you. Let me hand over to back to our chairperson, and thank you again, honourable chair members, for today.
Thank you so much, Chen and team. Thank you so much, honourable chairperson of the committee and honourable members. That is the extent of our presentation and the answers that we are able to provide. We hand over the baton to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mbava and the team. I think we can proceed with our meeting. We are free to continue being part of the meeting. Honorable members will jump to the minutes of the committee, the minutes of the minutes of the meeting of the 3rd of May 2022. Let's take off the FFC presentation. Darren, I still see the FFC presentation on the platform. Darren?
Chairperson, yes, I've removed the co-host permissions. Should be gone.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you very much. Honourable members, let's go to the minutes of the 3rd of May 2022. The minutes were sent to us. Can I have indications? Can I have a mover for the adoption of the minutes?
Chairperson, I move Mlenzana.
Honorable Mlenzana moves for the adoption of the minutes. Agreed. Seconder?
Kaiso seconds, Chair.
Honorable Kaiso seconds. Right. Thank you very much. I think that's the only set of minutes we are having. Darren, do you have any announcements?
Chairperson, yes, I have two announcements. The first one is Mr. Kwankwa apologized after the presentation commenced, so he submitted an apology. It was just a little bit late.
Yes.
And the other announcement is, Chairperson, next week we were supposed to have a meeting with Department of Police on the 2022 Appropriation Bill next week, Wednesday. However, they are saying that they have a prior engagement with the Portfolio Committee and they're asking for an alternative date. So I'm going to suggest that we take Friday the 20th, Chairperson, next week. Instead of meeting with police on the 18th, we'll meet with them on the 20th, if the committee is happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
Honourable members, and as you know, that these weeks, in fact, this term is very difficult because there are also budget votes and so on. So I think we need to be as flexible as possible. Any opposition to that, honourable members, to this suggestion by Darren?
Honourable Chair.
Yes, Honourable Tehale.
Thank you very much. I want to support the idea. To me, it's even good because it doesn't clash. Friday does not clash with my State Security Committee, JCI Committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Honourable Tehale. Seconded, honourable members?
Yes, Chairperson.
Thank you. Let's make that amendment, Darren, and let's inform all the honourable members about the change which has been necessitated by the commitment of SEPs. Okay.
Which I will do.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that. Any other announcement?
No, Chairperson. That's it. Tomorrow we are meeting with Sasria on the 22 second adjustments appropriation bill.
Thank you, Darren. Meeting Sasria tomorrow. Thank you. Honourable members, that brings us to the end of our meeting. The meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks,
Chairperson. Thanks, Chairperson.
Mara ye khale ke sa o bone wa tseba.
Hey, di a clasha the meeting, Che.
Di a clasha ka nnete. Mara ke thabile ho utlwa voice ya hao.
Leboga le nna.
Bye, comrades.
Thank you. Thank you. We're having budget votes, all members, that we should attend in the afternoon. Don't forget.
The mini plenaries.
Mini plenaries, yes. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
We'll remember, Chair. Thank you.